All right, yearbook class, let's go a little bit deeper into creating awesome headlines. Here we go. So here's what you already know from the last video. Headlines are like clickbait, right? They should make the reader want to learn more, but they're not obnoxious. Like, you won't believe this one thing that happened during the basketball game. That would be obnoxious. Don't do that. Boring headlines like girls basketball don't work. We would never do that. And you really don't want to ever use more than 2 fonts for headlines. And that's our procedure as well. We usually use 2 fonts for headlines. But let's get a little bit deeper. I didn't feel like that last video went into the fine details about how to write headlines like it should. So that's what we're going to do here. Here we go. What you need to know now. The headline should always refer to something that obviously happened at the event. And I'm going to give you a lot of examples of this, all right? This will almost always be something that is mentioned in the captions or is super obvious from the photo. And so one of the things I don't want you to do is you should never, ever, ever write your headlines until you've written your captions. Writing your captions first makes writing the headline substantially easier. So the headline should be the last thing you add. So how do we actually write good headlines? Well, let's look at some and learn from them. So here's a great headline for this mod right here. This is for the Polar Plunge. And it was they were raising money for a charity or raising awareness. I can't remember 100% what. We could probably read the caption and find out. So the headline was "Freezing for a Reason." It's very catchy. It's very clever. It's catchy because it rhymes. And these people were getting really cold and they were doing it for a good reason. So "freezing for a reason" works really well as a headline here and is a billion times better than if we just said "polar plunge" or "it was cold" or "you won't believe what this one person said after they jumped in the river." Nah, never mind. Don't ever do those. This definitely makes us want to know more, right? So great headline, catchy, it rhymes. That's what we like to see. All right. Oh, I got to move this again. Here's another really good headline. Oh, come back. "When calc gives you lemons." So this headline plays off the famous saying, "When life gives you lemons, make lemonade," right? These sayings are sometimes called idioms, and idioms are a great way to find headlines. So one of the best ways to come up with headlines is to search for a related idiom. So I just went in and did a search for lemon idioms, and I'm going to click on this. And the freedictionary.com will give you lots of idioms. So I typed in idioms and typed in lemon and went to the word idioms. And here's all the idioms that it knows about that have to do with the word lemon. So this is a great way to find headlines. So the person who made this headline probably could have gotten away with just saying "when life gives you lemons," but she did "when calc gives you lemons," because this is about an AP calculus class, I want to say. Or maybe just regular calculus, but it's a calculus lab about lemons. And I love the cleverness there of "when calc gives you lemons." Very well done. All right, how about this one? This is a bowling one, and the headline is "Not a Moment to Spare." And it's a bunch of bowling photos, obviously. So it plays off the word "spare," which is a bowling term. The bowling alley, in this case, is also called spare time lanes. But it also gives us a feeling like that time was running out, or maybe they won at the very last minute, or something happened at the end. And neither the photo or the captions tell that story. If there was a caption in here about how Torrey Peterson won in the very last frame, then this would be a great headline. Okay? So you don't ever want to use a headline just because it sounds good. This one sounds great. It sounds like it's a cool headline. It has to do with bowling because of the word "spare," but it sounds good just because it sounds good. It's not actually tied to the photos or the stories. And we don't ever want to do that. That's like dating somebody just because they're hot. It just doesn't work out in the long run. You're usually going to break up. It's usually not going to work out if that's the only reason you guys are together. Another thing too, if the headline is going to go over the photo like it does here and here, you want to really make sure it contrasts. So this is a dark headline against a darkish background, and it's really hard to read. The problem is we can't make it a light headline because it's also over the white background. So the correct fix for this would have been maybe to take the whole word "not" and move that into the photo and then make it brighter. Or the real correct fix was to come up with a better headline. Honestly, you could just get rid of the word "not" and it could just be "a moment to spare," because then it's just about how they had time and they made it done, or time to spare. Or strike is also another word. And I thought strike a pose because these guys all kind of have like a pose, right? That they look like they're holding. So strike a pose. Or bowling alley. And you can see the ball going up the alley. And these girls are great bowlers. So it's right up their alley. Any one of those, I think, would have been better headlines than not a moment to spare. Alliteration is another way to make headlines interesting. Alliteration is basically when we just take a bunch of words in a row and they all start with the same letter and sound. So in this case, ping pong presentation. It works. It has the alliteration to make it interesting. It's the mod is clearly about ping pong and somebody's doing a presentation. So it works. It ties the whole thing together and it does a good job. Now, we could talk about the photos here, about how this is not the most interesting photo, but this is not the video for that. Here's another good example of alliteration, but I want you to use the words that you would use. And what I mean by that is, like, I'm old and boring. So if I was writing this headline, I probably would have put basketball bonding, but baller is a word that you guys are more familiar with and more comfortable using. And so it's totally fine here to talk like teenagers talk to a certain degree. You don't want to be like, yo, this is the best, the baller team, dog. Not like that, but it's okay to use a little bit more casual language in your captions and headlines because the yearbook is for teenagers. So baller is a much more common phrase. So baller bonding is totally fine because this whole mod is about how the girls' basketball team bonds through their stretching routine, through their out of practice activities, and so on. How about this one right here? The headline is "So on and so forth." This is a super clever play on the idiom "so on and so forth." So we took an idiom, but then we made it even more clever by changing the spelling of the word "so" into "so" because this is a mod about sewing. Okay, so it's related to the photos and stories. It's catchy, it's clever, it's interesting, and it definitely makes me want to know more. Okay. How about this one right here? This one is not an idiom or alliteration, but it works really well. And because this whole mod is about how the cross country team that are all about running basically takes over C Hall every lunch and they play games and they just hang out and they kind of dominate and take over the whole hallway. So C Hall run over is kind of like, it's a double meaning of like it's being both taken over by the cross country team, and the cross country team is a bunch of runners. So it works, and it's very clever. Nice job, whoever wrote that one. And last thing is I want you to try using the words you came up with for step 1 of your caption worksheets. This is another reason why you got to write your captions first. If you're having a hard time coming up with your headline, a lot of times you can go back to those captions worksheets and look at your words that you put in the brainstorm thing. In these examples, the word psyched, games, and faces were all words that were on the caption worksheet in step 1. This one ended up getting very cleverly changed to not just getting psyched, but to getting psyched because it's for psychology class. Very clever. This whole thing was about games and fairy tales and the games that people play in them. So let the games begin was very clever. And then this one's about the many faces of Mo. And so it has a little bit of alliteration, Minnie and Mo, but it's also got the word faces in it, which is where it came from, that caption writing worksheet. All right, guys. So those are some examples of good and bad headlines. In review, we want to make sure our headlines are catchy, clever, or interesting. And I probably also should have added short. You'll notice none of these are very long. We make our headlines interesting and catchy by idioms, alliteration, being creative with spelling, rhyming, linking events. If a headline sounds good but isn't related to what's happening, don't use it. Use the words or language that teenagers use within reason, and use your caption worksheets for inspiration. If you can do all of those things, you can write really good headlines, and it's not as hard as you might think it is. So good luck. I hope you guys create awesome headlines.